Welcome to Unit 4, Helping Kids in Foster Care Succeed at Church. In this final unit, our team will present 10 practical tips for helping kids in foster care succeed at church.
Number 1, use child-centered language. Humans want to be known, but not by our most painful life circumstances. Imagine introducing someone by saying, "This is James, he just lost his job." Really? We would never do that. Dignifying children is imperative in our ministries. Therefore, adults should use child-centered language. Instead of saying, "Lucas is a foster kid," or referring to him as the foster kid, try saying, "This is Lucas, he's visiting today." This separates his identity as a child of God from his circumstances.
Number 2, set appropriate learning goals. As leaders in the church, part of our job is to teach kids the truths of God's Word. So, when we prepare sermons, talks, and other learning activities, we need to ensure that the difficulty of our lessons is appropriate for the children we're teaching. Kids can't learn and succeed if the lessons are too easy or too difficult. If you present material that is too easy, they might feel like you're talking down to them, or just get bored because the lesson isn't challenging enough to engage them. Remember, just because a child has behavioral problems or learning gaps doesn't mean they are less capable or less intelligent. In fact, a child who is used to being underestimated may respond well to more advanced content. Give them something to accomplish that they can be proud of. Just stay on the lookout for learning gaps and cognitive deficits. Some kids are going to need extra support and resources to help them learn. I came across many inspiring examples of this during my research. At one church, the children were required to memorize a list of Bible verses before they could go to summer camp. There was a 10-year-old girl in foster care named Sarah, who, because of her frequent displacements, never learned how to read. That meant that she couldn't memorize the Bible verses because she couldn't read them. But the pastor didn't excuse her from the requirement. Instead, she pulled Sarah out of class and tutored her one-on-one until Sarah was able to memorize the entire list of Bible verses. Because of that pastor's investment, Sarah hid God's word in her heart. She knew that she was loved by her church, and she learned that she had the power to do hard things.
Number 3, meet individual needs. Ministry isn't one size fits all. The standard program will work for most kids, but it probably won't work for everyone. Sometimes the best thing we can do for a kid is to let them opt out of the standard program. This might seem surprising at first, but consider our goals while the kids are at church. The top priority is not to get through the lesson. Instead, it's to build connections and share the love of Jesus in ways that are most accessible to each child. In some situations, a child might not even want to go into the room due to feelings of fear or shame. But a child doesn't have to be in the room to hear about the hope possible through Jesus. The key in meeting the needs of kids who've experienced so many hard things in their lives is to be flexible. We've had deep conversations in the hall outside the room, the parking lot, or in the playground through our attentiveness to the child's needs.
Number 4, empower the child. As we minister to these vulnerable youth, it is crucial that we empower them to advocate for themselves, express their thoughts and feelings, and actively participate in decisions related to their spiritual growth and well-being. For example, we can let them choose what activity to do during playtime, or how they respond in worship, or how they serve in the church. Encouraging children in foster care to get involved in activities, leadership roles, and service opportunities can further empower them. This could include opportunities to serve as peer mentors, lead youth group discussions, or participate in community service projects. By providing these meaningful engagements, we can help promote a sense of purpose and belonging, while also developing their skills and talents.
Number 5, acknowledge and include. Many children in foster care feel unwanted and excluded, and this can create a high level of sensitivity to perceived rejection. For example, if a child raises their hand and doesn't get picked for something, they might become upset and cry. It is not helpful to offer platitudes such as, "Don't worry, you'll get to do it next time," because they know there may not be a next time for them. This does not mean that we need to pick them every time, but we should find ways to acknowledge them and include them as much as possible. Ella often felt excluded in her 4th grade Sunday morning small group. Many of the girls in her class went to school together. The teacher recognized Ella's isolating behavior and began giving jobs to the girls each week. The jobs included passing out items in class, picking up the prayer requests that others had written, and even giving the girls the role of a buddy to the 2nd graders during large group worship time. Ella felt acknowledged and included. She eventually became a permanent buddy to one of the 2nd graders and looked forward to her role as a leader. Acknowledgement and inclusion gave Ella confidence at church, and though her countenance remained shy, she told her foster family that attending church was the best part of her week.
Number 6, address sensory issues. Many children who've experienced trauma, including those in foster care, experience sensory processing challenges. They may be easily overwhelmed by loud noises and chaotic environments. So whenever things start to get loud and crazy, like at VBS when the kids are shouting their team cheers at the top of their lungs, take a look around and make sure everyone's okay. Is anyone covering their ears or trying to escape to a quieter area? Does anyone seem irritable or frustrated? Do you see someone covering their eyes, lying on the floor, or crawling under a table? Or did anyone's senses get so overloaded that they lost control of themselves and started running around the room like crazy? If you're seeing these kinds of behaviors, there are a few things you can do. I always recommend keeping a few pairs of headphones on hand. Sometimes that's all it takes for the child to be successful. Have a quieter space where kids can go if they need to be further away from the noise. At VBS, we had a boy in our group with sensory processing issues. During the worship time, I had one of our junior helpers take him out to the hallway and sit with him until things quieted down. And remember, kids' needs can change from week to week. When one of my teenage boys was going through a rough patch, he couldn't tolerate being in large group for games and worship. It made him extremely anxious and irritable. But he was able to be successful when we let him sit by himself in the next room and listen to the worship music at a lower volume.
Number 7, don't take their behavior personally. Before walking into a room full of kids, we need to make sure that we're ready emotionally and spiritually so that we can respond in helpful ways to the kids in our care. If we start our time together tired or already frustrated, we may take a child's behavior or words personally. Instead of making an assumption that the child is being defiant or disrespectful, let's take a deep breath and remind ourselves this isn't about me, and dig beneath the behavior to discover a need the child may have. One weekend, I was called into an elementary-aged room. There was a 3rd grade girl named Amber who was refusing to participate. No matter how much the leader encouraged her, Amber sat in the reading area and refused all invitations to gather with the rest of the kids. I sat down near her, but it was clear she was in no mood to talk. But after sitting a while, Amber shared that she was going to a new foster placement later that day. She literally had no clue where she'd be going to bed that night. She wasn't defiant or disrespectful. She was distracted, wondering what the next few days would bring. We sat as she talked about how much she missed her birth mom, who was in prison. We got some markers and paper, and she wrote a letter to her mom. While Amber did not participate in one single planned activity that service, I believe she got something much more important. She was able to move at her own pace, she was listened to, and she was given the space to grieve all that she had lost. Sometimes the best things that happen in our rooms have nothing to do with the lesson in front of us, but are all about the child in front of us.
Number 8, Be prepared for intense disclosures. Sometimes children will decide to share sensitive information. These disclosures can occur in private conversations or in group settings where other children may overhear. It is essential to have a clear plan in place for handling such situations. Determine when and how you will discreetly pull a child aside to discuss their concerns privately, ensuring their comfort and privacy. Additionally, it is vital to be familiar with the policies and procedures related to reporting abuse. Furthermore, consider the potential impact on other children who may have heard the disclosure. Develop a plan to provide support and assistance to those children who may experience secondary trauma as a result. Create a safe space for them to express their feelings and concerns by arranging for a counselor or trusted adult to meet with the affected children or offering age-appropriate resources to their parents.
Number 9, maintain consistency and predictability. Kids in foster care frequently encounter unexpected changes and severe disruptions to their lives. We can help them by maintaining consistency and predictability within the ministry. One way we can do this is by maintaining a predictable schedule. Write the itinerary on the board and call their attention to it. If it's a kid's first time in the ministry, walk them through the schedule ahead of time so they'll know exactly what to expect. You could say something like, right now it's free time. You can choose an activity from the craft table or build something with the Legos. At 11:15, we're going to gather here on the carpet and sing some songs together. At 11:30, Mr. Jeff is going to come up and tell us a story from the Bible. At 11:45, everybody goes to small group. Your small group leader is Mr. John, the man over there in the red shirt. Your group meets in room 8, right down the hall. That's where you'll get picked up when church gets out at 12:15. If you anticipate any changes or disruptions to the ministry, let the kids know about it as soon as possible. Don't let it be a surprise. Even little things like a planned vacation deserve advance notice. If I know I'm going to be gone for a conference, I try to tell the kids in my small group about a month ahead of time, and then I remind them each week leading up to my absence. It's just a way of honoring them and letting them know that their feelings matter to me.
Number 10, anticipate potential triggers. Because we cannot know every child's story, there is no way to anticipate every possible emotional trigger. However, certain topics, words, or phrases may be particularly triggering for kids in foster care. For example, be careful with how you use the words parents, family, and home. If a leader says to the group, "Your mom and dad love you very much," they might think, "You don't know my home life. My mom broke my jaw." And when they get picked up after church, don't say things like, "Hey, Ben, your parents are here, you're going home." Instead, just say, "Hey, Ben, your people are here." Or, "Hey, the night's closing out." Another potentially triggering topic is sexual purity and premarital sex. Tragically, many kids in the foster care system have been raped or molested. When we emphasize the importance of sexual purity, it can trigger feelings of guilt and shame and make them feel like there's no hope for them. They might think, "I'm not sexually pure anymore, so I'm going to hell," or "I didn't even have a choice. Who's going to want me now?" Next, be cautious when discussing child abuse or neglect. Consider that some children who have experienced abuse haven't yet realized that their experience was abusive. If they're making that connection for the first time at church, it's gonna elicit a lot of intense emotions. Also, be extra sensitive to hot button topics like gender identity and sexual orientation. If a student asks a question like, "Is it a sin to be transgender?" there is a fair chance that they themselves are wrestling with their own identity or sexuality. It is possible to remain faithful to the doctrine of your church while maintaining a supportive and accepting posture towards that person. Finally, be careful around topics like suicide, self-harm, or eating disorders. There are almost certainly students in your youth group who have struggled in the past or who are currently struggling with these challenges. Remember, it's not only kids in foster care who have faced difficult situations. Many of the kids in your church are facing battles you know nothing about. So whenever potentially triggering topics are discussed, all of the leaders in the room need to be extra sensitive. If you see a child or teen starting to cry or get upset, Have a safe, trusted adult check in with them. Something like, "Hey Luke, I noticed your face when they started talking about such and such. How was that for you?" If a kid shares something personal, respond with open-mindedness and sensitivity. Don't make blanket assumptions or diminish their experience. After all, we don't know what someone else is going through, and when God will use us to shine His light into the darkest places.
In this final module, our team presented 10 tips for helping kids in foster care succeed at church. As you reflect on these ideas, I encourage you to consider how they might apply to your own ministry context. As you do so, allow God to work through you as the hands and feet of Christ to reach the hurting kids in your community and invite them into the family of God.